Hi, everyone. I'm Debbie Kilday, and this is part of the National and International Beat Poetry Festival 2021. And first off, I have Rich Ferguson from California.
Hey, everyone.
Mhm.
Woo. Greetings from
So-
California.
So, Rich, how did you get started being a word artist?
Well, I mean, really from very early on, I always had a love of words. The way my mom tells me is that our family was on a road trip once, and I hadn't been reading yet. Like, I was talking obviously, but not like officially reading words. And supposedly on this family road trip one summer, we were out on this highway and I just started reading the road signs. And my mom and dad like looked at each other like, holy cow, he's reading the road signs. And so, that was sort of my first exposure, words, loving words. And I always loved reading, writing. When I graduated Rutgers University in New Jersey, and all I wanted to do was move to California, play music, write poetry. Ended up in San Francisco. First place I stopped at was City Lights Books. Picked up a copy of Gregory Corso's Gasoline, and that like really cemented it. It was like right then, it was like, yes, poetry, that's the deal. And just started going to poetry readings, really like growing up in public. I was very green. I just did it, put it out, and just the more I put it out, the better I got. I just went to all the poetry readings in San Francisco. Luckily, I had some mentors, shall we say, take me under their wing and like, hey, kid, you're a little green, but you got potential. And so they kind of showed me the ropes, and it kind of just went from there.
Hey, Rich, could you explain a little more? Because people sometimes act like it just happened. I mean, obviously, were you influenced in school? I mean, what drove you to go to California? I mean, I remember during that time period for myself that somehow we all knew some things would happen in California or across the country. Yeah. And then you obviously knew about City Light Books. So that was somehow in your consciousness, I guess.
Well, it was mainly actually music that kind of drove me to go west. I was taking drum lessons in New York City, and so it was that bug, like go west, play music, play rock. And so, but at the same time, I had also taken my very last semester of college. I had taken this, it was actually a fiction course. And the very last week of the fiction course, it was like the ghetto week of the fiction course, where the teacher said, all right, let's write some poetry. And then by the end of the class, my teacher said, you're a better poet than you are a fiction writer. and I agreed with her. I mean, it was like, poetry definitely seemed to come more naturally than fiction. Fiction is just, I mean, I've published a novel, but poetry just comes a lot easier. So it was that kind of combination of like really interested in poetry, really interested in playing music. And so I just, packed up my records, packed up my drums, literally just threw my stuff in the back of my Toyota and headed to California.
Yeah. How long have you been doing this?
Oh, I mean, well over 20 years. I mean, yeah, a while. And, I mean, sometimes I feel like, I don't know. I'm very heartened, by people like Bukowski, who'll be like, oh, Bukowski, he's someone, that, just was sort of slaving away. And I mean, not that I'm like slaving away. I mean, it's like, I love this. I think, heck, writing poetry things like, I've met some, present company included, I've met some of the most amazing people I've ever met because, writing poetry, playing music. But it's very heartening to read poets like Bukowski and other people that are like, okay, you can do this like well into your adult life and then some, even like to your last dying breath, and you can still find inspiration from others to keep going, yeah.
I got another question for you. If what is you watching your career, watching you, I should say, if we want to consider it called a career. We've known each other for a long time, and over all these years, it seems that you've really managed to collaborate with some very skilled video folks, other musicians, and that doesn't just happen.
Yeah.
You had early on, I thought, some very slick videos. And early on, you had more that, were really like you were in newsrooms. I mean, all kinds of things that you
Yeah. I know exactly.
So I remember a whole series. So, for other poets who are, thinking, that doesn't just, you just don't start writing poetry and suddenly go, okay, I'm going to produce, 15 videos. That's not how that works.
Yeah, this is a really good question, Paul. And I feel pretty blessed in this way that I have been able to collaborate with a lot of great artists, be they other poets, musicians, directors, painters. And one of the videos you're referring to is some of the work that I did with the LA director here, Mark Wilkinson, for Human Condition, that has the newsroom sequence. And he also did one of my favorite videos, All the Times. But, I've collaborated with other directors, Chris Burdick, who's here in LA, and other wonderful folks. But, and musicians like Butch Norton, who's Lucinda Williams' drummer. He's appeared, he's actually in the Human Condition video. And, a lot of it comes from, well, first of all, doing the best that I can, being the best that I can be so that I can bring something to the table, so to say, and show these other people that I have something to sort of bring to the conversation, and that, which hopefully makes it interesting for them to say, wow, I really like that. I think I can bring something to this conversation as well. And together we can make this thing that's really cool. And, another thing I like about collaborating is it always, I was going to say often, but it always brings out a part of me that wouldn't have been revealed had I just been sitting here and doing something, by myself. During COVID, because I couldn't get together with a lot of these wonderful artists to collaborate in person, I kind of had to teach myself how to do certain things, like make some of my own videos. And that's a very cool experience. And I will continue doing so. But I always love working with other people because it definitely stretches me. And I like to be challenged as an artist. And I feel it challenges me in certain ways that I might not necessarily be able to challenge myself. And a lot of it is just okay, here's one thing. I've often reached out to people and say, hey, I'm this poet in LA. I really love your work. Would you like to collaborate? And, sometimes people are like, oh, I don't want to reach out to them. What if they say no? Okay, yeah, I've had that happen. But if they say no, just go to the next person and just put yourself out there. And there have been many times where I have put myself out there and they've said yes. And I'm like, holy cow, this would have never happened had I not just said, you know what, I'm going to reach out to the person. And it was through one of those collaborations that this director, Jamie Cotto, who did this amazing film called One Giant Leap. And I think the 20-year anniversary of the documentary is coming up soon or something. He saw one of my very first spoken word videos, or actually I sent it to him. I had just seen One Giant Leap and I sent it to him. I was like, I saw One Giant Leap. It blew me away. Here's a video of me doing spoken word. And he got back, he reached out to me. He's like, oh my gosh, you're amazing. You know, Duncan Bridgman and I are going to be coming through LA to film the sequel for What About Me? Do you want to be in it? And I was like, hell yeah, I want to be in it, you know. So again, you know, the idea of collaborating, just put yourself out there. If they say no, fine, go to the next person. Just boom, put yourself out there and, you know, grow, test yourself.
It's like David Amram saying to me, do you mind if I come and visit you? He did say that to me. He's going to be at the festival.
Nice. Yeah, but that's a really good question, Paul, you know, because I've had some people ask me that sort of question, not quite as succinctly as you did, but sometimes they're just like, how do you like meet all these people to collaborate? And it's just like, yeah, just put myself out there.
Well, you said some important things. I mean, you have to start believing in yourself, and you have to start believing that you do have something to offer. I mean, that was similar to me in terms of trying to create Do It Now. Somebody said, how'd you get the best musicians in the Valley? And I was like, I asked them, you know.
Yeah.
and luckily they said yes. So, I mean, you know,
Yeah.
it's kind of one of those, you don't know. And yes, they could say no. And maybe everybody could look at you and go, what are you talking about? Why would we want to do anything with you? But yeah, just to keep it with you, I know from, you know, watching, because like I said, we've known each other for more 10, 15 years. And I've seen all the different videos coming out. And sometimes I looked and said, wow, how did he pull that one off? That's great. You know, I mean, because I just know from trying to get video artists, you know, it's expensive, or you got to put a lot of money up, or someone's asking you to be in it and they're putting the money up. And it's not necessarily going to be making you big money. It's going to get you some cred if someone goes and looks at it. But really, you know,
it's really about relationships, making relationships.
Yep.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, with Mark Wilkinson, who did Human Condition and All the Times for me, I met him in a yoga class, and I had heard that he was a film director, and I just went up to him after a year. Oh, you know what? It was, I was playing drums for a yoga class, and he came up to me after one of the yoga classes, and we just started talking. He was like, oh, do you ever play out? And I was like, well, I do spoken word and I perform with musicians. He was like, oh, you should let me know when you're playing. I was like, well, as a matter of fact, here's a flyer. We've got a show coming up. And he came to the show and he was like, that's really cool. And I was like, let's do a video together. And he was like, okay. And All the Times was the first one we did. And he was like, okay, meet us at this address. I showed up to the set. He had this whole church, this old sort of church in the East LA that wasn't being used. He had this whole film trailer with equipment. He had this crew of like 12 people. I mean, I didn't pay for it. He does like commercials and stuff, and he just like got a bunch of people and just said, hey, I'm working on this kind of cool thing. You want to just like lend your services? And bless them all, they said, yeah. So, I mean, I felt like a rock star showing up, and like I had a whole film crew, and, you know, bless Mark, I didn't have to pay for it. I mean, I think I bought lunch for everyone that day, but like you were saying, Paul, I mean, if I had to pay for something like that, it'd have been 50,000 easy. Because we use green screen, and especially for Human Condition, we were using green screen and all kind of stuff. It was crazy.
Yeah.
So bless all those good people who've helped me out along the way.
So where do you see yourself now? We have been living through COVID.
Yeah, well, it's interesting you should say that, because I've been, you know, here we're like in the middle, actually drawing toward the end of 2021. And I was thinking, oh my gosh, you know, this time of Beat Poet Laureate, it was 2020 to 2022. Next year's 2022. I feel like I have spent, as all of us have spent so much of this time in COVID, haven't been able to go out and perform or, you know, do things in this capacity of this title. And I was just feeling like, oh man, I have to do something. Like, I feel like I need to do something as a way of saying, okay, this is sort of helping to mark my time with this title. So I'm currently working with, I reached out to former San Francisco poet laureate Kim Shuck and a poet here in LA, Alexis Roan Fancher, and they're going to help me. They're going to be like co-editors. And I'm also going to work with Eric Morago at Moontide Press, who published my most recent poetry collection, and going to put together like an anthology of California voices to sort of celebrate this time of, being Beat Poet Laureate of California. So it's going to kind of be a celebration of beat voices, but also post-beat voices, get some politics and, sex and society in there as well. So we're currently, it's in the early stages, so we're still trying to strategize a game plan, how to get the poets together. But I've spoken to Eric at Moontide, and we're looking, if all goes well, for a release date, hopefully by the end of next year, at the absolute worst at the beginning of 2023. So I've been trying to put, all this to good use. So yeah, that's how I've been spending my time lately.
So,
Just so you know, you don't ever lose your title. You will always be a part of this.
Cool.
I was joking with Deb before he came on, because my US was for 1 year and it was 20 words, so I couldn't do anything with it. So I was kind of like, okay, well, there's so much of that. I said, now my has-been, the new US poets coming in, I'm already gone, But to get back to what you're talking about, it came up when I was at the Austin International Festival, and I realized that, there's many different kinds of poets, but there's the folks who just write, and they're in their rooms, and they're kind of waiting for publishers, or they're waiting for someone to suddenly knock on the door and go, we love your work. And what you just described is, you're a person who is, obviously you're spending your time writing, but you're also you remind me more of what my background was in terms of being an entertainer, of juggler. You have to go out and put out flyers. You have to go out and put out brochures. You have to go out and talk to people. You have to think up events and make them happen. Is that a normal inclination for you, that you just understood that was how to make things happen, and that's why you're going for it and doing it?
I don't know if you can see it, but you just gave me goosebumps, because you're asking all these really cool questions, really pertinent questions. Well, again, ever since I was like really young, like I was like going door to door selling greeting cards, even Fuller Brush. I was like selling Fuller Brush to housewives when I was like a teenager in New Jersey, and like, I would go to like these women's store, and they'd be like, oh my gosh, a teenage guy with a mop in his hand selling Fuller Brush, come right on in. And so I did really well with that. But, in college, I graduated in advertising. So there was always something in my brain, like put myself out there, sell something, even if it's like selling myself. And Paul, all about this. And, when I spent time in San Francisco, I was in a band for my 4 years there, and it was all DIY. You don't really see bands doing it anymore, but we would put up our own flyers all over San Francisco. We would hand out flyers at shows. We put out our own records. We hopped in a van, toured the country twice. So it's like DIY is sort of like, it's like part of my DNA now, and it has been for years. So when I have to think now of like putting myself out to publishers, putting myself out to collaborators, putting myself out in whatever capacity, it's kind of like, I've been doing this for years, it's kind of what I do. And Paul, it's what you do too. I know from what you just said, but also just from past conversations we've had, either producing events, because I've done a lot of that too, and I know you have, but also just putting myself out to be part of events or whatever. Yeah. But it's, again, and, I'm sure you can attest to this, Paul, but it's like, you can't peddle some crap product, or you can't like false advertise, you gotta be straight with people. It's just like, here I am with all my warts and glory, and I'm going to just be straight up with you. If you like it, let's go. If not, again, I'll move on to the next project. Yeah,
So would you like to read something?
sure. I will. I'll read this poem, and I'll just say a quick little, usually I don't preface poems, I just read them, but I'll just preface this one because I think this is like a very recent poem. And I was featured in this online reading a month or so ago. I don't want to say which one, but it was like a Zoom reading. There were a bunch of people on, and I was like, okay, I'm going to read this new poem. And I started reading. And at first it was just kind of this low, kind of almost inaudible, sort of like someone like singing, like, and I thought, I've been to poetry readings where I would be performing and someone in the audience is really getting into it and they're like clapping or like, humming or something. And I thought it was something like that. And then it just kept getting louder and louder and louder. And I was just like, and it was someone singing words, and it became this competition where it was just like, and eventually I just had to stop because I did not know what was going on. It turned on, there was this woman who was getting ready to perform after me, and she didn't know her mic was still on, and she was practicing her song while I was reading my poem, and it just became this huge collision. And I was just like, I'll move on to another poem. Maybe just it wasn't time to read this new one, so I'll read it now. And hopefully,
Let me get
Debbie,
my voice going. Let me get my voice
yeah. So anyway, this is called "The Sirens Have Been Screaming Lies About Us." The sirens have been screaming lies about us. Those emergencies proclaiming we're their bastard next of kin, children of oblivion and broken glass, worried wanderers roaming pitiless cities of demolished optimism. Our cold bones clattering like a failed fortune teller's shuffled deck of cards, paralyzed predictions, doom-age daydreams, wounds unwound into paths where crossed and double-crossed by black cats engaged in hex trafficking. The sirens have been screaming lies about us, claiming we've got bullet holes for eyes, that our mind's white space has been filled with suicide notes scribbled in misery's ink, that our every moment is spent taping up the busted windows of shattered souls, that our names have adopted all the aliases of pain, that we're ravenous and raving as terrors tied off vein, aching for a syringe of serenity that'll never come. Sirens wail a ballad shambles. Sirens make the word flower sound like murder. Sirens unsheathe their knives, slash the night with death cries. The sirens have been screaming lies about us, that we're pimps and pariahs, monotone messiahs decked out in sallow skin promises of raptureless tomorrows, that our remaining graces, cross dresses, annihilating angels, that our scraps of good intentions have been ravaged by death traps, kill cults, and outlaw death trips. The sirens have been saying, we've got the keys to the extinction machine, that we've landed a major role in Dante's Inferno, that we're haters, hedonists, heart arsonists who stuff down angers or dry weeds in fire season, begging for a match. Sirens wail a ballad shambles. Sirens make the word flower sound like murders. Sirens unsheathe their knives, slash the night with death cries. The sirens have been screaming lies about us, that deep within our chests are burlap bags crammed with rabid dogs, dogs howling, growling, foaming at the mouth, dogs whose temperaments are built from lost bets and the short end of broken wishbones, dogs craving the raw meat of gutter speak and blood clot lullabies. Sirens have been saying our inner weather is thunderstorms followed by swarms of torment, that we're incurable cretins tearing down Xanax Edens, that grief's got us on speed dial, that all our dreams got a date with the coroner on the street corner. Sirens wail a ballad shambles. Sirens make the word flower sound like murder. Sirens unsheathe their knives, slash the night with death cries. Some nights, those sirens are so loud, only tombstones can sleep through it all. First time I've been able to get through that poem. This, Debbie, you got it first on film, on Zoom.
I'm very honored.
Me too, likewise.
So Rich,
Yeah.
that one to me was a Rich Ferguson poem. What's your sense of coming up with your style? Do you feel like you have a style? In listening to the word, the kind of combination of words that you do.
Yeah.
That when I hear some of the stuff, it's like, no, that's Rich Ferguson. I don't hear somebody else put that together. That those imageries of
Right.
syringes and babies crying, or whatever it is that comes
Right.
that fall. So people sometimes ask that, or people sometimes search for it. Other people try to listen to Kerouac albums for 6 years and try to sound like him instead of just being themselves. And
Right.
do you want to say anything about your?
No, actually, and again, I think that's a really good question. These are really cool. I really like answering questions like this because it kind of really gets to the heart, I think, of a lot of my writing process, or what kind of triggers my brain or inspires me. And I think it's that sort of the crossroads of my my music, my playing drums, and my love of writing. It's kind of the crossroads where those two things meet. And like a poem like that, or other poems, I think sometimes I'll just throw a bunch of words on the page, but then I have to kind of go back and listen to it. Like I edit with my mute, like I sometimes put words out with my music ear, but I really, really edit with my music ear. And I know, Paul, that you do a lot of music and stuff, so maybe this is somewhat similar for you. But like when I read stuff back, or when I like go in and sort of edit, I really kind of try to tune my like I listen with my rhythmic ear and like what sounds good on the tongue, especially if I'm going to perform it. And I'll catch certain lines, like, or certain images, like if that doesn't feel good on the tongue, if it doesn't excite my ear, I'll just dig back in, monkey with it some more, change it up, try it again. Some people are like, I'll just write a poem and I won't edit it, and for some people that works and that's cool. But man, there's that saying, writing is all about editing, or I don't know, however that saying goes. And that's so much the way it is for me. I have my writing, but editing is just, that's where really I discover a lot of my writing is through the editing process, and especially when I edit with my drummer's ear, my musical ear. So a lot of those images are born out of just musicality and just trying to find images that fire my imagination.
And you've really created your own style.
Cool.
I think people sometimes search for styles, or they think, oh, beats, there's the poetry voice, there's this, there's, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And you could say, well, okay, what if I hear this band, it sounds like them again. And sometimes it can be detriment because you feel like maybe all their songs sound the same unless
I get
really
that.
listen. And so, I was just curious of your own feelings about that, because we do want to have something that identifies us, where someone says, oh yeah, that's a Rick, you want that kind of, but you want him, you know what I mean? Or whatever it might be.
Yeah. I was reading an interview recently, and I can't remember if it was like an interview. Oh no, it was actually, it was actually an interview with the comedian Jim Gaffigan, and he was being interviewed by another comic, and they were talking about like the creative process with creating comedy and stuff. And Jim Gaffigan was talking about how he would have young poets come up to him and ask him like how he does it and stuff. And he was talking about that process whether you're a comic or a poet or a musician, and you were kind of just saying it, Paul, how when we're starting out, we try on different voices. Like, when I was in my band in San Francisco, we were coming up around the time that REM was coming up in some of those bands. And so, we had some of our jangly rock songs, and people would say, oh, that sounds a little like REM, or that sounds a little like the Violent Femmes, or, you're a writer. Oh, that sounds a little like Kerouac, or, that sounds like Sylvia Plath or whatever. And I think when we're starting out, or not even necessarily when we're starting out, maybe sometimes when we're feeling a little stuck, we'll read other poets or something. We'll try on different voices, like, oh, how does this one fit with who I am? How does this, Wanda Coleman coat fit, how do I wear that or whatever? And I think we sometimes experiment, like, how do those people do it? And we might, sort of try little things where we, if not purposely try to imitate their style, kind of like just adopt certain things, like, ooh, I like that thing that person does. And, there's the, like, John Lennon or Dylan or whatever, they've been interviewed, and how, like, everyone's steel, it's just like, it's just a matter of how you, interpret it. And I think eventually, no matter what artist you are, you go through those phases and stuff. And eventually, hopefully, you kind of land on what is your voice, after you kind of go out into the world and try on these different things and go through different phases. Hopefully you sort of land in a place where it's like, yeah, this is my true voice. I've tried these other voices. That's cool. This is what I most resonate with. This is like what my heart really, this is my heart speaking. So, yeah. But all those other phases can be fun. It's like, oh yeah, I went through my REM phase. I went through, yeah.
I definitely can hear your voice. No matter, I don't have to see your face or anything. I know your voice and your style.
Yeah. I've heard. I always get tickled by, like if I'll post something on Facebook or something, and someone will say, "Oh yeah, I could read those words, but I could hear you doing it." And it's like, that's cool. I like that. That's cool. Yeah, and Paul and Debbie, I'd be curious to hear your thoughts about this. But what always fascinates me is the idea of and people have talked about this on and on and on, the idea of writing for the page versus for the stage. And there've definitely been poems I've written where it's just like, this like feels like a live poem. I don't really think this is going to be one that's going to stand up very well on the page, but I think live it's going to tear it up. And I'll have like really sort of quiet poems. This looks very elegant on the page. I don't think it's really one I want to perform live. And then there are those poems that sort of land like right dead in the center. I think this looks pretty good on the page, and this would be hella fun to perform live. And I think I'm getting better. I think I'm pretty good at this point about, like, this is a live poem. This is a page poem. This, I think, can serve both purposes. How's that for you, Paul, with that sort of thing?
Well, one thing is setting up with a band in which we're not setting songs and they're improvising, and sometimes they don't even know what I'm going to read, and I don't know what they're going to play. I had to give up holding to my poem, because in other words, sometimes I would be doing a piece and I had 2 more stanzas and the band is stopping. It's because they thought they were done or something, And then I'd be out in the audience, and then someone would come up and say something to me that was in the last 2 stanzas that I didn't do, as if they still got that. And so it made me realize, okay, it's a whole gestalt or something. It's my mood, the musicians. I really need to be there. And music also changes. I think you drop words because they're not going to go, you know what I mean? So you think you're writing that you're going to say this whole thing, but then when you're up there, you realize I just need to say these 3 words.
Yeah.
Or I'm going to break that up. So there's that part of it. It is complicated in terms of thinking, am I writing for the page? Or someone will say, well, that doesn't read well on the page, but if I say it out loud, it sounds better. So then you have to kind of figure that out, I guess. That's not always true, but sometimes I think unless you are going to, I'm going to write the way I speak. I mean, that's kind of a lot of writers do that. So,
Yeah,
but we could definitely have a long discussion about this, which would be great. This is supposed to be about you, so.
yeah. Well, actually,
I mean, I'm good, but I think this is an important thing for writers to try to, like you said, experiment with doing other things, adding their own music or being musicians. And then do you find people who really want to experiment?
yeah.
Because otherwise, I mean, I had somebody say, oh, I'm going to improvise, but then they wanted to control everything. It was like, well, that's not improvising, it's like,
Yeah. And actually this touches upon the earlier thing we were talking about, collaborating. And I think one of my earliest fears, if I'd say fears of collaborating with other artists, especially ones that I had never performed with before, especially in a live setting, is that idea that you were just talking about. There is a certain thing about you have to let go of certain preconceptions or just how you're going to perform something, because there has to be that, and the other performers have to do that as well. If it's, it's there's like this person has their agenda, this person has their agenda, but if, like, especially in a live situation, there has to be that point where like you just kind of each have to like not compromise, but there has to be something where you actually are listening to each other, engaging with each other in the moment. And there is a certain fear with that. And I know that when I was first starting to collaborate with others in a live setting, I did have a fear of like, what if this goes off the rails, or what if like this, or what if like that? But I think, the more I've done it and the more I just kind of get more comfortable with, kind of like what you were saying, being in the moment, it becomes an adventure, because I do things like I'm getting better at just like saying to heck with it. I'm going to be in the moment, and I'll even do things that was like, wow, I didn't even really plan on doing that or saying it that way. And I did a show up in Ojai this last weekend. Butch Lucinda Williams, drummer, played with me. Sometimes we'll perform as a duo where he does all this crazy percussion stuff. And he performed with me. And Butch is like, aside from just being like, when he's with Lucinda Williams, a fairly sort of conventional, straightforward drummer, when he like performs with me and some other people, like he graduated from Cal Arts. So that guy can get crazy creative, and he does some like off the wall stuff. He'll put plastic bags on his hands and feet and make crazy sounds and just all kinds of stuff. But it's like, he is one of those artists that put upon someone like me, it's like when I perform with Butch, I have to be in the moment, because he's going to throw some stuff at me that's like, wow. It's like, that's a new sound I haven't heard before. That's a new beat I haven't heard played like that before. I can't just do the same old Rich. I have to like take what I do, but, kind of flow it into what Butch is doing. And then Bernie Larson, who used to be in David Lindley's El Rayo X, he sort of runs the Ojai Underground Exchange where he played. And then he accompanied me on guitar for this one piece. And again, just the way he played, like, made me perform this one particular piece in a way I had never done it before. And it's just, I love that, and like you were saying, Paul, it's just, I mean, it's all about just kind of letting go of certain ideas, being in the moment. And it sometimes does take work, it's just like, okay, I'm going to just work through my fear and just keep doing this and just learn how to just sort of be in the moment and be cool with that, and try to not go in with too many, preconceived ideas or set agendas, and just kind of see what we can do in the moment.
So just for my last follow-up on that is, I mean, I think you just showed you came full circle, because in a way, you wouldn't have found that drummer if you weren't explaining all the things that you expressed about yourself before. I mean, it's not unusual then for you or me to be hooked up with people who are that experimental, because we're experimental.
Uh-huh.
Sometimes you forget about that and realize that, you don't trust yourself or whatever. And as you said, you weren't gravitating towards the safe. You were willing to go, okay, I see this guy's talent and he's going to give me some amazing percussion that nobody else has given me, but I wasn't thinking about doing this piece that slow or that fast or whatever, but
Yeah.
I'm going to try it now. So
Yeah.
that says a lot about, and as you said, then that makes you grow. It makes you look at the piece in different ways. It makes you realize, oh, that changes the words because I said it this way over last time I said it with that. There's so many things. So I just wanted to say, this relates to our question to you. I mean, all these things don't happen unless you really do have a part in it. And that can be just of who you are, of who you draw to you. And then the conscious aspects of wanting to be in those kinds of positions to see what happens, which is great.
Yeah.
This is what produces,
Yeah. Yeah. And it all just makes this adventure so much more grand and exciting. Never a dull moment.
I don't know if it has anything to do with musical background, because I was a singer in a rock and roll band back in the day in the 70s. And I think that influenced me when I performed with a band behind me. I think that I have that, I don't know, in the tempo in my head or something like that.
Yeah. 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 I think once you get a taste of that, I mean, I think it sort of stays with you in some form or another.
Yep.
Yeah.
So do you have anything else you want to read for us?
I'll do a short one. We'll just do a short and sweet one. This is called Not on Your Grave. The most joyful moment of the tale is when the woman says to the man, I will dance with you now, not on your grave. The most joyful moment of the song is when the melody hymns to the listener, I will dance with you now, not on your grave. The stranger standing in the shadows that seems to be wielding a gun, but is really a heart on his sleeve as he says, I will dance with you now, not on your grave. The most joyful moment is when the child says it to a parent, when the moon croons it to the tired and lonely driver, when all our ghosts bundled in the flesh of the moment reach for our hand and offer, teach us how to dance.
Nice.
Very nice.
So we may just use this edit to just have it on the website, on your page too, because it's
Cool.
all about you. So
Thank you. Thank
So
you. Thank you.
this is an ongoing series that Paul and Chris and myself created, that we want to do different laureates, speaking about their backgrounds. And so what do you think of the organization since you've become a part of it?
I mean, I think it's wonderful. My only, I just wish that we were in different times so I could actually be out there and be having conversations like these in person, Yeah.
yeah.
So it's kind of like, I feel part of something really huge and amazing, but yeah, it's sort of that step removed because of just these times. And it's just part of it seems a little surreal and just whoa, but that's everyone's sort of experience these days. And there are times where I feel like I should be doing more with this. And, but that's part of why I'm doing, that's a big part of why I'm trying to spearhead this anthology, to feel like, okay, I'm doing something with this, or I'm trying to do something with this. Yeah.
I was going to ask you, because it's come up in different ways, of what was your sense? Did the award hit you in terms of waking you up, give you a sense of acknowledgement?
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Wondering
Yeah.
whether or not you could send in a check and we could extend it, or,
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely an honor. I mean, I think there's that, feeling, and it just kind of goes to sort of the person I am. Part of me immediately thinks wow, what an honor. And then immediately thinks oh, there are also so many other poets who are equally worthy of this honor, And, then I just sort of do that, but then, and then sort of, it gets put into my bio. So like when I would perform and like, someone would read my bio and like be polar, and like listening to it was a little surreal at first. I was like, oh my God, that's me. Like, so that was kind of a little weird at first, and I had a lot of people like, wow, Rich, that's freaking amazing. What are you doing with it? Well, sitting in my room during a pandemic. Not a lot yet, but yeah. So it's great. I just wish I was doing more, but trying to do what I can.
Well, if this makes you feel any better, people on the outside world came to me to tell me about you. So
Oh, cool.
it's not like I just picked you out of a hat or something.
Put it there.
Other people, come to me with names, suggestions, and they tell me about people they've met in the past.
Nice.
So
Nice.
the honor is very rich in acknowledgments from
Nice.
many
Cool.
people behind the scenes. Yeah.
Yeah, Paul, you were asking earlier about like live performances, and I mentioned it to Debbie in an email, and I'm spacing on his name, and Debbie, maybe you can help remind me, but when I was up in Sonoma doing that.
Clive Matson.
Yes, he came up to me afterwards, and I felt kind of bad because I had just finished performing, and like, I'm sure you can relate to this, Paul, after you like finish performing, you're kind of in a weird headspace where part of you is still on stage and you're trying to come back down. And he sort of came up to me like right during that moment. And he was very sweet, but I was kind of there and not there. And like, it wasn't until he sort of left that it sort of sank in. I was like, oh, that's who that was. And because he said, oh, are you going to the event in September? And I'm thinking like, what event is he talking about? I don't know. I don't know what he's talking about. I just got off stage. But he was very sweet. And I've been meaning, I need to reach out to him just to say hello. But that was kind of cool to meet him there.
Yeah, he's one of the original Beats, and he's going to be awarded this September.
Nice. Cool.
With a lifetime award.
Oh, very cool. Yeah, he was super sweet. And I always appreciate people just sort of approaching and stuff like that. But yeah, I need to write him and just sort of said, hey, you caught me in a weird headspace. Nice to meet you.
Yeah. So when you went up to City Lights, did you meet or did you see any?
Ferlinghetti?
Yeah, Ferlinghetti or something.
No, but during my time in San Francisco, there were two people that I did meet. One of those poets that sort of took me under her wing and was like, I'm going to show you the ropes, kid. I'm going to introduce you to people. She actually introduced me to Bob Kaufman before he passed away. She took me to his house and I met him. And one time when I was in North Beach, I saw Corso like walking toward me. And this woman who had taken me under her wing, she had all these stories about Corso. She's like, yeah, Corso, he'd stay at my apartment. He's a bum. He's like ripping off my drugs and shit, But she was like, he's a great poet, And I saw Corso once in North Beach, and he was sort of walking toward me, and I was like, oh my God, it's Corso, Gasoline, the first book of poetry I read. And we were like walking straight toward each other. And I was like, I get to meet Corso. And he was like walking right up to me. And I was like, Corso's walking up to me. And he was like, you got any drugs? And I was like, no, I don't have any drugs, Gregory. Is that all you have to say? And he just was like, and he walked away. And I was like, I still love his poetry, but I was like, Gregory, I love you.
You remember who the woman was?
You know what? I don't remember her name for the life of me. I don't, but she was so sweet. And she,
was it?
Yeah.
It wasn't Diane DePrima, was it?
No. I would have remembered if it was Diane DePrima. No, it wasn't Diane DePrima. No, but yeah, man, this woman had stories, man. She was like, in solid with a lot of those people, Kaufman and Corso, and she would just like, I would see her at readings and she would just pull me aside and tell me all these stories about beat poetry heydays and all these things. And at first when I first met her, I was like, is this lady for real? But like when she like took me to Kaufman's house and I met him, I was like, okay, she's legit. This is like real stuff. She knows what she's talking about.
I wonder if I could figure out who that was.
Yeah, I don't know.
This is in the
It is
San
an
Francisco.
important thing about who, I mean, you have to be out there doing things to then meet the folks,
Yeah,
then have other experiences to make that happen.
yeah,
Like that, you know what I mean? And there are been many times with many of those folks who I then met that you think, oh, okay, I'm going to actually be able to say something, and then nothing gets said. And then later you go, geez, what happened there? You know?
uh-huh. Yeah. I mean, and like with this woman in San Francisco, I wish I could remember her name, but yeah, I mean, I was very fortunate, and like I said earlier, like I kind of just grew up in public, especially with the poetry. I just like went up on stage and kind of set myself to task every week. I'm going to do a new poem at the open mic. And, it was people like her who would say, you're a little green kid, you got some things to learn, but you got lots of energy, you got spirit. And
Yeah, but also I think the important part there is that you were in a band, that you were used to being on stage.
yeah,
And
Yep.
that was one thing that definitely came up at one of the festivals, was people who feared the stage, didn't know how to even fix a microphone, didn't try to, or and sometimes were really well known for their poetry, but then when they read, people either didn't even recognize them or hated them. And
Yeah.
they kind of realized, and a couple of people realized, this isn't for me, this is a whole other skill. I'm not a stage person.
yeah,
And they would start to really realize, oh yeah, it's a craft to know. I mean, you have to be, and it's not just getting on stage 5 times, it's 400 times before you,
yep,
I mean, there's no rehearsal for stage. You have to
no,
be going up there and have all kinds of things happen to you so that you are good at being at it and on it, I mean, and so that's an interesting aspect to that.
yeah, that's a really good point that you raised, the idea of like, yeah, it's kind of, especially like with poetry, being on stage and doing poetry is really its sort of own unique beast. And really the only way you get good at it or really good at it is just by doing it. It's like you can't really practice to be on stage. You just have to like be on stage, and you have to also, like what you were saying, Paul, you have to sort of be on stage in a whole bunch of different settings. You have to be on stage when it's really going well. You have to be on stage where it's really sucky. You like be able to deal with that, because at first it's like and maybe you freak out. And I know I have, like early on, where it's like things aren't going like I planned. Abandoned ship. But then you just sort of, all those experiences sort of build upon one another, and you just work that muscle and you get better at it. And then it gets to a point where when you get out on stage, it kind of becomes natural, and people look at it and think, oh, that looks easy, getting on stage. But it's like, actually, this took a lot of work and a lot of, like you said, not just 4 or 5, but 400 and more times of being on stage to sort of be able to kind of just walk out here and just kind of make it look like everyone can do it.
Well, also, it sounds like you were also open, which is a really important
Oh, yeah.
point, to hearing like this woman or someone coming up to you and not being defensive by saying, you dropped it here, or you were really good with this, but what are you doing there, or whatever it is.
Yeah.
And it's not like a criticism of you. It's like, as you said, you're seeing it as a craft to figure out how to make it better,
Oh, yeah. And I think that's one thing that is definitely kind of worked in my favor over the years, is kind of trying not to be like too defensive or anything. When you can tell, like when someone's offering some advice or something, you can tell when it's coming from a place of like, here's an area where I think you could really get better. Or I see like you just need to fine tune this versus someone who's just like wanting to undercut you and like, just throw some shade at you or whatever. But it's just like, I can, I'm pretty good, I think, at telling like when someone is like trying to offer some advice. And I think I've definitely gotten better either live performance or even in just my writing. Like someone says, oh, I think if you tweak this a bit, that could make that line really stand out more. It's like, oh, cool. Thank you very much. And I think that's also part of being any sort of creative artist. Just like if someone offers some advice or something, like just like try to get rid of those defenses and be open to what people have to say. Cause good chances it could be something that help you get better.
Yeah, I had hoped that the organization would have, and we're working on it to try to have more of that. But it's hard to set up those kinds of atmospheres just due to all the competition and who's going to get the gigs and why would I help you if I don't want to get the gigs and all that kind of stuff. I mean, I experienced that because of juggling when I went to Europe. It was much more a craft and it was much more like being plumbers because it was families who did type wire or it was families who did trapeze, and they weren't going to share that they figured out a certain chalk or a certain kind of a shoe that they made themselves helped them be on the wire better. You know what I mean? Because this is their livelihood. And so it's a tricky thing to figure out how you can have, like you said, trust. You have your own antennas out to hear, oh, this person just wants to come up and they just want to attack. Or this is a fellow poet who really has a good eye and a good ear. And she's telling me, you're right. What if I listened to her? Yeah, I knew that I dropped it there or whatever it is.
Yeah.
Or I didn't know where to go with that, but I, thank you. You saw it. Okay. So somebody who's really listening can see it. I got to improve it,
Yeah. And I always really appreciate that. Like, you can, like the people that come up to you and the comments they say, you can tell the ones that were like really listening and really like we're being mindful, and what they're saying is very mindful, and they're saying it in a way to help, not hurt. And yeah, I really appreciate those things. Yeah. And another thing kind of along that line of what you were talking about being on stage, I think one of the greatest compliments I've ever received, I've had it a couple of times, but one time in particular where I was doing poetry with a live band, and I got off stage and this guy came up to me and he was like, I used to never really get poetry. I used to really be turned off to poetry, but like hearing you do it, I want to go and read some poetry. I want to like go give poetry another chance. And I was like, dude, man, you just gave me the best compliment ever. Thank you. I just thought that was great. Like what we do can like, help someone see it in a different way. I just thought that was great.
You have any final comments there, Deb? Do you want to wrap it up?
Well, I have to say, it's been very nice talking to you, Rich. It's always a pleasure. You're very talented. I can say it because I'm the boss lady.
Yep.
and you can believe it too, because I don't say these words lightly. As Paul.
Yeah, I never get any compliments.
Well, I'm giving you a compliment right now, Paul. You're amazing. You rock, and your videos are amazing. And I just, thank you to you both. I mean, I look forward to the day where I can just say that to you both in person. So, yeah. My hat's off to you. The hats on the wall are off to you.
Right.
All my
It's always a pleasure. It's always, like you said, it always makes me want to feel like, okay, I can't wait when we could just hang out. So
yeah.
Let's
or even perform together, Paul. I'm looking forward to that day too.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Yeah. All right. Well, good night to you both.
Good night.
And we'll see you soon.
Sounds great. Take care, man.
Take care.
All right.
So, Deb, how'd you feel that went? Pretty good, I think.
I'm going to.
On record.
How do I hit it? I'll stop.